So they respect that. It's kind of something that, what do you suggest? Because over time, people get desensitized, right?
Yep.
If people don't speak up, what's that statement that if good people do nothing, this is when evil can spread.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly. And that's very similar to a statement of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He said that anyone who sees some evil or sees something wrong happening, they should fix it with their hand if they're able to, in the right way, legally and all that stuff. But if you can't, and you're not able to do that, then you fix it with your tongue. Meaning you got to speak out against it. You got to say something, because if no one says anything or no one does anything, or if it doesn't even bother you in your heart, then it's like, how is society going to change? Who's gonna correct these things?
Yeah.
So we have to do that.
Is it because there's funding? Because obviously even people at these board meetings, when people have gotten up and they start to read from some of these books, the explicit details of the penetration, and then showing in the news reports when they go to show this the private genitalia of the male, the female, and then them getting into action and whatnot, the news media, they'll blur this out. Or they'll tell the person who's at the board meeting speaking out of the details that in some of these books, and then they'll tell them to stop. So you'll tell them to stop at the board meeting, and then you also blur this out on TV, but then you expect for the little minds of children to go ahead and be exposed to this.
Exactly.
This is evil.
Exactly.
What are the arguments? What are the other side of arguments to excuse some of this?
What are they saying basically?
Yeah.
I mean, their explanation is, oh well, this is the reality of what's happening, right? So this is simply what people do, and since it exists, then we should just go ahead and expose the children to it.
Yeah.
It's a false argument, because it's like saying, you know what? Okay, pornography exists in the world, but does that mean you're going to be like, oh, because it exists in the world, should we show it to children? Should we even show it to the average adult? Did you just put it on public television? That's not the way that it works, because there's so many crimes, there's so many bad things that happen in the world. Do you want to go and like explicitly show this to every single person and like flash it in front of them? It's going to go into their mind, it's going to go into their heart, and then it becomes something that's completely normalized for them. So that's a very weak argument, right? I think there's just double standards. The double standards is that, there's so many other things which you'll censor out. You're not going to allow children to use foul language in your classroom, right? And at the same time, people use a lot of bad language. They use a lot of bad words. So do you put in the kindergarten book, do you put in like the little book about, the bears coming and like visiting the household? Are they cussing each other out with the F word and all that stuff? You don't see that. You say, well, that's part of reality too. Why do you censor that? You censor it because that's not appropriate for children, let alone being appropriate for adults. But yeah, it exists in the world. But we're like, no, we don't want our kids to learn that behavior, because then they're going to think it's normal. If little bear cusses out the other, baby bear or father bear, mama bear, or whatever it is, then the kids are going to start imitating that. So they're like, we don't want that to happen. But when you start showing the same thing, you see like, male bear coming and getting married to another male bear, you don't think that's going to also normalize it for them? And they're like, well, I can go ahead and do this. So that's exactly what the agenda is, but it's a very double standard.